Hi, I'm Art Kaplan. I'm at the Division of Medical Ethics at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine in New York City. An issue has come up. We are just coming out of a conference that was devoted to the ethics of research on children. And the issue that keeps coming up, and I know it's going to come up for many of you who are watching, is to what extent do we treat young people as capable of making their own medical decisions? I mean, at one end of the spectrum, it's clear if you're 3 years old, you're not going to make any medical decisions. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you're 17 years old and 11 months, and you're in a state that recognizes 18, let's say, as the legal age of majority, or in a country that does that, then you're going to have a lot of input into major medical decisions, maybe even some decisions where your parents or your loved ones are not going to really be consulted. If you say, I need to make decisions about reproduction, my behavior sexually, or whether I want to get vaccinated, I think it's fair to say that many young people who are mature minors do have the ethical right, and sometimes, by the way, even the legal right at ages like 16 and 17 to be treated as adults. But what do we do in the middle between 3 and 17? How do you deal with children in that broad swath? And do we say, until you're really up toward the 16 and 17-year-old age, you don't have any input? Well, one idea that's come up out of the ethics and pediatrics field is to require children to assent, not consent. And what that means is you inform the child, let's say about research or therapy, what's going to happen, but they don't have the last word. However, they might be listened to if they came up with a convincing reason to veto something. So just saying, I have to give you a vaccination, and the child cries and says, I don't want a needle. Who does? I cry a bit myself when facing vaccination. That's not really a refusal. That's not really even failing to give assent. That's just normal fear and worry that has to be managed, whether you're taking blood or doing other things. But it is possible that a child might say at age 12, there's a experimental therapy. Gene therapy is going to be really burdensome on me. The parents very much wish the child to do it, but the child is saying, I don't want to take that chance. It doesn't mean that they have the absolute last word, but it means you have to listen carefully when they're saying no, or for that matter, when they're saying yes, against what a parent or parents might really be convinced is the right way to go. So you're trying, in a sense, to mediate by taking into account the child's view, not letting them have the last word, but making sure they have some word that has to be addressed as part of what's going on. I'll give you a case that I dealt with a few years ago. There was a child who needed a third liver transplant. Two had failed. He was 13. His parents basically said, you got to give him another chance. We can't lose our son. He said, I've been through two of these. They're horrible. I don't really want to do another one. And as tough as that was to hear, we ultimately came to an agreement that he would not get his third transplant because the odds of it working were low, and the burden of trying to do that massive operation was high. He died. And his parents eventually came around listening to him, even though he legally did not have the last word. We felt he had enough experience. He'd been through it. He knew enough about that. I might not have let that young man decide what would be available to listen to for music or watch on TV in my house. His taste wasn't mine, and I think I have a more mature set of aesthetic tastes. But when it came to liver transplant, he knew a lot more about what he'd been through than I did, or his parents, or anybody else. So I think at the end of the day, in that tough range, when you're dealing with an adolescent, an older child, not quite old enough to convince you that they're almost adults and we're going to treat them that way, but I think when they're sort of developing autonomy, when you see their ability to take charge of decision making start to emerge, you want to solicit it, you want to ask about it, you want to manage their care with their input. They don't get the last word necessarily, but I do think they merit getting a hearing. I'm Art Kaplan at the Division of Medical Ethics at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. Thank you very much for watching.